Hello, can everybody hear me? Can I get something in the chat if you guys can hear me? Okay, perfect. All right, everybody. Okay, welcome to the live stream. My name is Joseph Guido. I'm the tutorial director here at QWave. And today we're going to be going over the basics of mixing. More specifically, we're going to be going over the 5 essential tools that you can use in any mixing project. Literally anything, it'll work. First, let's start off with what QWave is. QWave is a music production club at Queen's University where we help people enter the world of music production. Streams like this are one of many ways you can learn about music production at QWave. We have many more events. In the chat, for anybody who's interested, I've put... Oh, I can't post in the chat. Give me 1 second. Anyways, unfortunately, I can't post in the chat. But if anybody wants the stems to this session, just type in the chat and I will send it over at the end of the stream. Okay, so I have a track here that we should mix. But first, I want to go over 2 important things. We're going to go over the tools to use, and then I'm going to ask that everybody wears headphones so you can hear the changes in the mix. Don't listen on speakers or iPhone speakers because you won't be able to hear really any changes. Anyways, the 5 tools we're going to talk about are EQ, compression, reverb, delay, and saturation. These are the 5 main things you're going to be using in almost every single mix. There are other effects like chorus and all that other stuff, but these are the 5 most important ones. Other very important elements of mixing are automation and panning. So panning is basically just when you have an audio signal and you want to move it from the left to the right in the stereo field, you'll grab a pan knob, and basically the audio will sound like it's in your left ear or in your right ear. That's pretty much panning. Okay, let's start with EQ. So EQ is a tool used for shaping sounds by manipulating frequencies. It consists of, I pull up the EQ here, this is known as a parametric EQ. It consists of the low end, which is pretty much just everything below around, I'd say 200 hertz, just to keep it simple. Mid-range is going to be 200 hertz to about 2000 hertz, and then anything above 2000 is more or less considered high end. If you notice up here, there's subsections, but for today, we're just going to worry about low end, middle, and high. Most common types of EQ. So right now I have the parametric EQ. This is the most common type of EQ. Everybody uses this. It's super versatile. Then we have semi-parametric. I actually don't have the plugin on this computer, but basically semi-parametric, the best way to describe it is it's an EQ with very limited, you're very limited in your controls pretty much. And then we have dynamic EQ, which again, I don't have the plugin on this computer, but essentially what a dynamic EQ is automation is what I was talking about earlier. You can basically automate these things to go up and down, which is pretty much what it does. Okay, so the controls of EQ, there's your gain, which is basically where on these sides are your gain controls. So if I grab this, I can boost it by however much I want, or I can lower it. And it same goes with every single point on here. Every single point can be boosted or lowered. The points are sections, yeah, I just covered that, where we can go over, where we can boost or attenuate frequencies. So like, let's just say if I'm playing something and I'm hearing that it's got too much high end, I'll just grab this and I'll lower it, and then I'll pinpoint the frequencies, but we'll get into that later. The Q refers to the width of the point itself. So if you notice when I pull it up, it's kind of got like this curve that goes up. This can be adjusted with your scroll wheel. or this knob over here. So the more that I scroll up, the more wider the curve gets, and the more I scroll down, the narrower it gets. The narrow things are more if you have a specific kind of frequency where you know it needs to be attenuated. So for example, in vocals, sibilances like your S's and T's are around 6 to 7 hertz. So you'd kind of make like a wider band. Basically a more narrow band is it doesn't affect as many frequencies. So if I really want to hone in on 2936, I could really hone in on 2936. That's pretty much what it does. And then the last thing we have about EQs is slopes, which are more or less on your high and low end. So this is more when you're rolling off low end is what the term is called. So pretty much what you can do is you can go up here and you can select the curve, and then this is the curves are done by dB per octave. So this is known as it doesn't really say here, more advanced ones will go over dB per octave. So for right now, just because I guess this is kind of beginner friendly, just realize that we can control the slope. We've got a slope like this, or we could do a more narrow slope, which is basically controlled by these dots up here in FL Studio. And this ensures that anything below, let's just say 100 hertz, is completely cut off. And the reason we're doing that is because low frequencies are more, you got to be more careful with low frequencies because it tends to build up in your mixes. Anyways. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah. Okay. Compressors. So again, I don't have this kind of compressor installed, but we're just going to go over digital compression, which is the basic FL Studio compression. So compression is used to make loud sounds quiet and quiet sounds loud, pretty much. Or in other words, it tames the dynamic range. The reason why I like this one so much for beginners is because it shows you the waveform. So if I go to my guitar, I'm going to turn off all the effects just for now. I'm going to pull up the compressor. 1 second, guys. I'll mute this track. So we've got this guitar here. I'm just going to put a loop on it. So you can actually see the waveform itself, and then you can, if you click on it, you see the pause up here. It literally pauses the waveform so I can describe it better, which is why it's good for beginners, because a lot of compressors don't have this visual, so you kind of just need to learn by ear, which is good. After a certain amount of time, you shouldn't use the visual, but for now we're gonna use the visual. Anyways, the controls of the compression. So the most important control is probably your threshold, which is basically this line over here. And again, in a lot of other compressors, they don't have the line, but it's just for visual, so it's like good. But anyways, the threshold here is used to basically say at what point is the compressor going to be active. Or in other words, if I lower it down here, the waveform has to kind of cross this threshold before anything happens, is basically what I'm trying to say. The ratio specifies the amount of compression or how aggressive or soft it is. So the best way I like to describe it is if we have a 2-to-1 ratio, which if you can see up here, it'll tell you, like if I highlight over here, it says 2-to-1 ratio. So if we have it down here, the threshold, and the sound is going over the threshold, for every 1 decibel that goes over this threshold, 2 decibels will be reduced. That's a 2-to-1 ratio is where you actually have compression. If you literally have no ratio, there's no compression really going on, because it's basically saying, it's basically just not doing anything. So I can kind of show you this here. So if you can see, this is where the compression kicks in. So this little peak of the guitar that's kind of going over, is being attenuated based on this ratio. So the more you increase the ratio, the more compression you have, pretty much. So do you see how more it's getting way aggressive, way more aggressive, these spikes? Should probably check the chat. Send the stems into the Discord or put them on a drive so we can access the links. That's a very good idea. I think I'm going to do that. Let me just do that really quickly. Hopefully I'm making sense. If nothing's making sense, please let me know. Why do we use different types of compressors? Okay, so this is a very good question. The reason why we use different types of compressors is because different compressors have, they add color to a sound. So I want to see if I can show you this. If I had this compressor, I would be able to show you, but pretty much, let's see if I can. See if I can load up. Oh, there it is. So if I create a new track, and then I'll just run a, I'll run a sine wave through it. So I can't really show you this because I don't have my compressors, but basically with a regular compressor, if I pull up, Fruity Limiter, or the compressor. It's just called Fruity Limiter because limiting is another kind of thing. But anyways, if I pull this up, and then I go like this, let's just put an insane ratio. It's being compressed, but it's just compressing this little peak right here. Like, it's not adding much color. The color happens with, see these little guys over here? These are called harmonics. So basically, to kind of sum it up, when you have a coloring compressor, it adds more of these harmonics that are down here. If I boost them really high, you can hear it. But it adds more of those. And the reason we like that is because it makes sounds thicker. It makes sounds fuller. Which is where it also really ties into vocals. Like, vocals love coloring compressors because making a vocal thicker and fuller is always good. Okay. Let me get rid of this. Hopefully that answered your question. Let me see if I can get these files in the Discord really quickly. Should I just put them in the general? I'm just going to put them in the general. Files for... Okay, I just put them in the Discord for anybody who is interested. Okay, any questions on compression? No? Okay, we're gonna move on. Okay, this is where things kind of get a little bit easier to kind of understand. So reverb is basically a sound in a room when the other sounds have stopped, pretty much, if that makes sense. It's based on bouncing sine wave or sound waves off of the room. Reverb is meant to add space and make things more ambient in your mix. So this is a default reverb in FL Studio, and I'm going to go over the controls now. The main controls, there are a lot of controls here, but the main ones we're going to go over are size, diff, decay, wet, and dry. So the size basically means the size of your room. So if I go like this, it makes a very, very small room, almost like a chamber. And then the bigger it gets, this is almost like a grand hall kind of thing. The diff adjusts the surfaces in which the sound bounces off of. So you can literally make a room like this. You can make it more rectangular, and then so on and so forth. And yeah. Decay adjusts how long the sound waves stay in the room for, or basically how long the reverb is in the room. So again, if you see up here, all the values in FL Studio are in the top left. So if I go over here, you'll see at the top as I adjust it, it says decay time. So the decay time will be 6 seconds. So basically, when the sound goes and I press the pause button, the sound will keep playing for 6 more seconds. The wet knob is basically how much reverb do you want in that sound, or how much do you want the sound to be affected by the reverb. For today, actually, we're just going to leave dry at 100%. Dry is basically just it's a blend, but it's basically your untouched signal, like no effects. Okay. Delay. Delay is an audio signal processing technique that records an input signal to storage, and then it plays it back over a period of time. So not to get confused with reverb. Reverb is almost a digital room, whereas delay is like a specific like computer, or like not a computer, but like it's just like a memory bank that stores your signal, and then it just outputs it at different intervals, if that makes sense. So the main controls of delay or that we're going to focus on, are the feedback volume, which is this knob right here, the feedback, these guys over here, and then the time input, pretty much. Oh, and in the input, the pan, but we'll get over this. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, so the feedback volume basically adjusts how long you want the delayed signal to keep playing back for. So I should probably give an example, actually. Let's go to the guitar. I have a reverb set on this guitar here. Or not reverb. Delay. So if I just reset everything here. Cool. So we'll put it on normal for now. So as you can hear, there's obviously a delay. Without, it sounds like this. With. All right. So the volume, as we were saying, is basically the length of it. So if I up this a lot, it's going to come back. See how there's a lot of delay. And then if I go here, there's going to be less of it. Okay, so feedback normal is as you can see, but as before, I set it to normal, which basically means that it plays the signal at the center of the stereo field. I'm not going to get too complicated on that, but basically, I'm not going to make things too complicated by talking about it. But basically, normal just plays it in the center, whereas ping pong, it plays it from the left to the right, which is also controlled by this pan thing, which we'll get to in a minute. But for now, if I just crank this thing, you'll be able to hear it. If you have headphones in, you can hear it going from right to left. The reason why the ping pong feature exists is because it basically just adds more space. And in my opinion, adding more delay on guitars rather than reverb is way better, because it gets the guitars to stand out more. A big part of rock mixes is not so much to get that ambient guitar sound, is not so much, it's reverb a bit, but it's more delay, because the more reverb you add, it kind of just it muddies things up, and it makes the guitar sound like, how do I explain it? It just makes it sound like not as good. Like, it doesn't sound as crisp. The delay, because it's like a set interval of when the sound gets put back and forth, then it makes it more, it just makes it better, because reverb is less controlled. That's a simple way of putting it. Reverb is less controlled, delay, you have more control. Okay, the last thing about a delay is the time. So the time adjusts the rate at which the signal is played back. So not to get confused with feedback. Feedback is the length of it, but time is the rate. So what I mean by that, I will show you. So let's just increase our feedback. Now it's kind of going. That's like a 2 time, as you can see up here, or a yeah. But then if the more I increase this, the more, see how the delay kind of changes? It's getting, if I really crank this, it'll take a long time for the signal to actually come back. And it's still outputting the signal. That's how time works. So not to get confused with feedback. Okay. Saturation is the next one. Any questions so far? Any questions from the chat? I should probably take a look at the chat. Let's see. Okay. So if there's no questions so far, I will keep moving forward. Okay. Saturation. Saturation basically just makes things sound fuller, punchier, and louder. Saturation also adds depth, presence, character, color, and warmth. Saturation is a subtle form of distortion that adds pleasant sounding harmonics. The effect originates from the analog days when audio recordings ran through various pieces of hardware. And again, as we were going back to this example, if you guys remember where I was outputting the sine wave and I was talking about the harmonics that are up here, these guys, basically saturation just adds more of them. I can even use this to show you. Again, my saturation plugin isn't on here that I mainly use, but I guess I'll just use the Sound Goodizer. So if we crank this up, let me just change the mode. I mean, it doesn't sound very good with a sine wave, to be totally honest with you, but it's more or less just to show you the harmonics. So if I really crank this, there we go. These are what we're looking for right here. These harmonics. It doesn't sound like a lot, because again, it is a sine wave, but those are what add. They just make sounds fuller, punchier. Pretty much what I said. Saturation is a very underrated tool. A lot of people overlook it, but I'll show you this example with the snare when we start mixing, where it also has the potential of lowering or giving you more headroom. It's basically a really good hack for more headroom. Headroom being, it basically means that you have more volume to work with in terms of mixing. But again, we'll talk about that when we start mixing. Okay, so saturation. Again, we're going to have to use the FL-based saturator. Saturators are also can be very complex or very easy, but for today, we're going to go with just this easy one. Even this plugin that I had before was a very easy one. In the Discord, I left links of the plugins that I was trying to show for this session, but you can take a look at this. It's called it's Softtube's saturation knob, and basically all it is it's a knob, and you just turn it up or down. So do you want more saturation or do you want less? The A, B, C, D are basically just different modes of saturation. They're basically just based on like analog gear and how analog gear would have worked, or it's based on how analog gear would have worked if it was saturating the signal and we had it here. Okay, any questions on saturation? I feel like saturation, the saturation that I'm describing isn't too complex. There are definitely more complex ones. There's one called black box, which is really good. So if anybody wants to look into that, it's called the black box. It's basically just the best way to describe it is it's got two blue tubes on the left and right of it. It's pretty cool. Okay, well, if we don't have any questions, give me 1 sec. I'm just gonna have some water. Okay. All right, now we're getting into mixing. I'm just taking 5 tracks from this song, which are the vocal, kick, snare, bass, and guitar. And I'm going to break them down. I just want to make this very simple, or I'm trying to make it very simple. Hopefully I haven't overcomplicated things. But I have, again, I'm mixing these tracks, but in the link in the Discord, there are also all these other tracks which you can try all the other stuff on, or any of the other concepts. Okay, so I'm going to show you right now. Again, my plugins aren't on here, so I don't know exactly how this is going to sound. But I'm going to show you what this track sounds like without effects and then with effects, and then we're going to break it down. So let's start. Also, let me know if you guys can hear the audio.
Já faz algum tempo que eu não te vejo. Me bateu saudade daquele teu beijo. Me perco nas memórias. Me lembro das histórias.
Okay, so I think we get the point. And then I'm going to show you what it sounds like with the effects.
Já faz algum tempo que eu não te vejo. Me bateu saudade daquele teu beijo. Me perco nas memórias. Me lembro das histórias que sempre te contei.
Okay, so that's what it sounds like with the effects. Now I'm going to break down pretty much what I did. Okay, so the very first thing before you even start mixing is you're going to want to set the entire project to mono. So what do I mean by this? So in FL Studio, if you're working in FL Studio, in the master channel, there's going to be a knob right here. And it's going to say, again, if you look up here, it'll tell you what it is. It'll say stereo separation. It says original, which basically means we're pretty much in stereo. If we turn it all the way to the left, it's going to be 100% separated, which means that it basically makes the track wider. Now, there's really no need to crank it this much. This will give you lots of problems, and if we ever do an advanced mixing tutorial, I can go in depth why, but this will give you a lot of problems. Never ever do it this much. Maybe at most you could do like a little bit, but there are better plugins that'll do it for you. So I think turning it to the left entirely, just completely ignore that. Turning it to the right, however, will merge everything in mono. Now, mono basically just means that there's no more left and right information. So if I go to this guitar real quick, I could kind of show you. So again, if you can hear on your headphones, if you're wearing headphones, you can hear the delay between the left and the right. Now, if I switch it to mono, it sums everything up, so it's just in the center. Oops, I just deleted everything. So see how things are just in the center, and they're no longer on the left or right. This is very good because sometimes stuff on the sides, like the left and the right channel, can distort your perception of the volumes of the tracks. So it's very important to put it in mono because it gives you a very clear understanding of the actual volume of the tracks, and then you can, based on the other effects, you can tune in and stuff, if I'm making sense. Okay, so switch it to mono. Then the second thing you're going to do is you're going to adjust all of the volumes. You're basically just going to listen to it. So I'm actually going to mute all the effects. So you're going to want to do this dry, no effects. This is the first thing we're doing. So
Já faz algum tempo.
everything's already adjusted, so I'm not going to do it. But basically, if you adjust it through this volume knob up here, and the reason you don't do it over here is because this is getting a little bit more advanced actually. I'll kind of finish my point really quickly, but you want to adjust it from the track source, because if you adjust it from here, you're adjusting all of these effects too. So basically what that means is that when you put the effects on and you're trying to like it basically just kind of like, how do I put this? If the track volume's too high, it'll reach these plugins first and then it'll distort everything. So you kind of just want to lower the track volumes first. Anyways, just not to get too technical, start from the track volume and just adjust it from there first. And then if you need to do slight adjustments, adjust it from here. So anyways, once you're done doing that, then the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to re-enable everything. Actually, I'm not. I'm just going to leave it for this track. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to roll off the low end. And the reason we do that, again, as I mentioned before in EQ, is that the low end is very susceptible to making everything sound like shit, pretty much. So if it's not meant to be in the low end, we cut it out. If it's meant to be in the low end, like the bass over here and the kick, then we'll leave it in the low end. So I'll show you what I did over here. So I did that slope when I was talking about when I was explaining EQs. And this slope basically just cuts everything off below 225 hertz. So it's a safe bet to say that all the low end is out. When cutting out the low end, what I like to do, because sometimes it's hard to hear in the beginning, but what I like to do is I'll play all the tracks and then I'll over exaggerate my cut. So for example, if I start here and let's just say I cut it around 900, we obviously know that's not in the low end anymore. We're now in the mid range, so it sounds really thin. Now what we're going to do is we're going to back this off until I reach a point where I really don't hear any more of a difference. So then that's kind of like a safe bet to say, okay, this is a good way to cut off the low end, or a good area to cut off the low end. Because if I stop hearing it around 200 something, then what's the point of keeping going over here? You know what I mean? It's not like you're going to hear it anyways. So anyways, just like this. So see how if I keep going, I'm not really noticing any changes being made. So I'll kind of just... So see, that's kind of sounding too thin. So I'll back it off. That's okay to me. If anything, we'll go a little bit lower just to make it sound more fuller. Okay. Let's go to the EQ of the guitar. Actually, what time is it? Okay, we're doing good on time. Any questions so far? Any questions from the chat? How can we listen to tracks and know what we need to do? That's a very good question. So usually when you're starting out, not even when you're starting out, even when you're doing like mixing jobs, you're gonna want to have a reference track, which basically is a track where you reference your mix to. So how do you know where to find reference tracks? It's pretty much just, so this is known as like Brazilian R&B. So you'll go Brazilian R&B and you'll find either one of your favorite tracks from there or a track where you think it genuinely sounds very good and you're trying to emulate the mix off of that. And then from there, what you'll do is you'll reference stuff. So the first thing you'll do is you'll drag the track in. It'll probably be mastered, so the volume will be way louder than the track you're mixing. So you're going to kind of want to turn it down to match the volume of your track. That's the first thing. And then the second thing you're going to want to do is just start playing with the levels. So be like, okay, where does the vocal sit in my reference track? So if the vocal is kind of like, let's just say the vocal is you kind of need something to compare it to, actually. Let's just say it's kind of like sitting below the guitar. It's very noticeable. Let's just say the vocal's very noticeable. And in your track, it's not very noticeable. Then you know you kind of got to push it up a little bit. That's kind of like a very beginner-friendly description of it, but you can really go into detail on nitpicking reference tracks. But anyways, yeah, reference tracks. Okay. The guitar EQ, very simple. I'm not doing anything crazy. I could do more stuff, but I'm just keeping it very simple for today. We're just gonna cut off the low end. And we're gonna do the same thing, actually, just to put my tone into use a little bit. So see how that's very thin? I'm gonna back it off a little bit. Here's even a good place, to be honest. Here's a good place. I'm gonna back it up just a bit more, just because why not? I mean, we're only really doing 5 tracks. You could be more specific when you're working with more tracks that have more low end. Okay, moving on. We're gonna go to the bass. Now the bass, you don't really have to do anything. I cut off around 30 hertz, always for low end stuff. I know I said not to, but the reason I do that is because the human ear can really only hear, if you'd be lucky to hear anything at 30, to be honest with you. Like, you may need like a subwoofer, but like anything below 30 hertz is not really heard. And like, it's still kind of being processed as audio signal by the computer. So by cutting it off, it's kind of just a safe bet. So just to keep things simple again, if you cut it off at 30 hertz, it's a safe bet to basically just control low end. Then I have a little bit of a boost at 50 hertz. I boosted it by 3 dB. Again, if you can see up here, if you highlight on stuff, 3 dB. The reason I do that is because I want to add a little bit more rumble. Plus, again, there's not a lot of low elements, and seeing that this is the only low element, we can boost it a bit. So if we go to our, if we enable it, again, nothing too crazy. A big thing I'm going to mention actually real quick is that mixing, all these techniques are very important and all these tools are very important, but the one thing that you should take away from all this is the quality of the recordings. That's the first thing you should focus on. If the quality of the recording is not good, the mix won't be good. It's just the way it is. You can try and make it good. I mean, not try. I mean, there's been attempts where like you can make it good with more plugins, but like just make it good sounding from the get-go, because then you can only go up from there instead of trying to fix the issues that you could have resolved in recording. But anyways, that's for another time. So for the bass, cut off at 30 hertz, little boost at 50. Okay, next we're gonna go to the kick. Any questions so far in the chat? Oh yeah, I forgot there's a delay with these streams, so I'm not seeing the questions until. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, just put in the chat and I'll get to it. Kick. Enable the. Okay, kick is more or less the same thing. I actually don't know why there's a boost here. I probably just fucked up, but I'm gonna get rid of it. Again, I lowered it around maybe 25 to 30 hertz ish. It doesn't really matter. Because this kick already sounds very good. Like if I solo the kick. We're not really... Like if I enable it and re-enable it, we're not really doing anything. When we get over here, we'll be doing more stuff. Snare. In my opinion, this is definitely the worst snare sound I've ever heard. But it's cool. For the snare, I pretty much just rolled off some low end again. I did the same trick I've been doing, where you kind of just roll it off a little bit. But again, this snare sounds bad, so no matter what I do to it, it's not really gonna make a difference. And then I just cut off some of the high end. High end cutting off, so the reason for cutting off the high end is very similar to why we cut off the low end, but it's more just to like leave room for higher elements of the mix. So I kind of just wanted to leave a little bit more room for the vocal. Again, this cut right here doesn't really do much, but it's kind of just an example of why we cut out the high end. Anyways, this is what it sounds like in the mix. Cool. All right, compression. I had my compression dialed in, but I don't have the thing, this plugin. So let's redo the compression, because why not? Actually, how much time do we have? 15 minutes. Actually, we'll redo the compression. We won't redo the compression. We're just gonna leave it because I kind of want to get to other stuff real quick. Okay, saturation knob on the vocals. So if we see here, oh, it's not. I don't even have my plugin again. That's crazy. Okay, so we're just gonna go to reverb. We're gonna skip saturation for now. I will redo the saturation on this snare though, because one of the biggest, you hear saturation a lot in transient elements, or they do what I'm trying to say with the headroom thing, or as I mentioned earlier with the headroom stuff, they do it a lot better. Do it a lot better. It's shown a lot better saturation in transient elements like the snare. Okay, let me go to this lead. Vox. Okay, so the reverb on here isn't a lot. With vocal reverb, you don't really want to do too much. You kind of want to create more of like a tighter-ish space. So as you can see, my decay here is very short. I mean, you could do it longer, but it kind of just, like, to see how long it decays, you kind of want to make it so that by the time it's done decaying, the next phrase of the vocal picks up. So if I have it too much, I'll show you what it sounds like. It kind of just like muddies things up, and it makes it sound like, how do I put this? It doesn't make it sound as good. Like, it sounds just like too ambient. You know what I mean? But if you kind of tighten it up a little bit. Again, if you hear headphones, if you have headphones, you can hear this a bit better. As opposed to if I crank this. See, that's kind of like building up, and it's still building up even after I paused it, because it's still outputting the sound waves. And then again, I don't have a lot of reverb on it. It's like 45%, because again, the way to create the space I think is through the delay. Oh, I should probably set it to stereo back. Okay, so once you're done all that, set it back to stereo when you're working with delays and stuff.
Tempo.
So if I get rid of these,
Tempo. Que eu não te
very dry sounding, and then if I put both of these in, it kind of adds more space.
tempo. Que eu não te vejo.
And yeah, again, I'm doing the same thing with the delay. Nothing too crazy. I'm keeping it normal, and the reason I'm keeping it normal is because if we go to the guitar, the delay for the guitar is what's doing the left and the right channel. So if I play them together, they both sound ambient, but they also sound like they have their own like pocket, if that makes sense. So if I also play the reverb of the guitar.
Tempo. Que eu não te vejo. Me bateu saudade.
So you can kind of hear both of them, or if I take it both out.
Tempo. Que eu não te vejo.
The guitar almost seems like it's trying to like fight for space. So I think that adding like the delay, the ping pong delay on guitars is very helpful. The quicker you do it as well, the delay. I want to see if it works on this plugin.
Tempo.
If I crank this.
Que eu não te vejo.
Oh, I have to.
Tempo.
Okay, not that fast.
Tempo.
It's not. So on other delays, you can make.
Tempo.
So on other delays, you can make the time quicker than this.
Tempo.
So it seems pretty quick right now, but you can make it quicker than that. And basically what happens is if you adjust the feedback a lot,
Tempo.
do you see how spacious it sounds? Like if I go like this,
Tempo.
or not like that, that's too much.
Tempo.
Like it still sounds spacious, but if I go like this,
Tempo.
it sounds more spacious. It doesn't sound as like delayed, you know, like you don't really notice the delay as much. It kind of just sounds like it has its own pocket. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that you can make it quicker, and then you could basically make it seem so like you don't have any delay, but what's it called? It doesn't have any delay, but it still adds a lot of that spacious sound that we're looking for. Anyways, that's just an effect you can do or not do. It's up to you. But I actually need to lower the feedback on this.
Tempo. Que eu não te vejo.
Oh, never mind the time.
Tempo. Que eu não te vejo.
Why is it being so weird?
Tempo.
Anyways, so yeah, that's reverb delay. Let's go. Obviously no reverb or delay on these guys. Any questions? No questions so far. All right. Let's see what else we can do. I guess I'll redo saturation, but I'll do it on the snare just because I could show you a lot better. Let's get the sound goodizer.
Tempo.
Okay, so I kind of have to dial this in, so bear with me. Yeah, the plugin is a lot better than this, but it's okay. We're gonna go gain, fruity, balance. Okay, so kind of a side thing. This is also very important, but it's level matching. So basically, the way that this saturation is working is, or not the way that the saturation is working. It's crucial to do this because I'm gonna crank this, and it's gonna like spike super high. Whereas if I have it off, it's really low. But by cranking the saturation, we're getting the harmonics, we're getting the fullness of the snare. So obviously it's really high. So where was it at before? It was at 12. So we're gonna put this in and we're gonna dial it at 12. And what you should notice is that what the saturation is doing is even when it's at 12, it still sounds very loud. So let's just see compared to if it didn't have saturation. So let's see if it works. So if I do before, then after. Nah, it doesn't really hit the same. Probably do it on D. Okay, this is kind of where it's more noticeable. So if I go here, that's before still, and then this is after. No, it doesn't really. It's fine. What I'm trying to show you is that if you get the plugin, if you go to SoftTube's website and you get saturation knob, this effect will be like night and day. It's just, I think that this plugin just straight up sucks. But yeah, go to SoftTube's website and get saturation knob. It's free to download. But yeah. Anyways, we got compression. Actually, I'll go over the compression for the bass. So again, the bass doesn't have a lot of compression, but you can see that I did a 2-to-1 ratio, and then it's got the threshold where it's kind of kicking in. So the more that I drive this down, I should have showed you guys this in the beginning when I was explaining compression, but I guess I'll show you now. The more when you drag this down, that's a good example of how threshold works. The threshold, see the line over here? This line is literally at the bottom, which means that everything should be getting compressed. Now, the reason we're still hearing stuff is because of the ratio. So for every 1 decibel, 2 is reduced, right? But it doesn't completely reduce it because of the ratio. If we had a limiter, by the way, is basically a compressor with the ratio turned all the way up. Because if you see this curve, so this is the threshold. This curve right here is basically what the ratio is. So the more we go like this, the more things get compressed. So the threshold is the point where it gets over, and then once it kind of reaches up here, as you can see before, that's kind of where the curve is happening. That's the point where it kind of gets compressed. Now with the ratio all the way down here, you see how the curve gets almost where the threshold is? It becomes a limiter, because then the limiter's controls are literally just a ceiling, which is this green line, and anything that passes over this will get completely knocked out. So now you see how there's literally nothing. It completely just knocks it out. It's like I almost turned down the volume. Limiters are very good for a lot of things, but their main use, just to keep it simple, their main use that you got to know them for right now is in mastering, because basically what it allows you to do is that it allows you to set very, very, very tiny ceilings. So like -0.5, and this basically eliminates clipping, because anything that goes over this, right? So if I were to like crank this up and the waveform were to go over this, it actually wouldn't. It would just completely cut it off. So it's good for that. Anyways, I think I fucked up my compression on this. Yeah, I did. Okay, so let's just recompress this. Usually when you're compressing, compression is more used. This is a very simple example, I guess. But okay, so do you see these peaks right here? See how this peak is kind of higher than the rest of the things? We kind of want to make everything leveled out. And what this does is it pretty much just allows, it doesn't allow things to go crazy. So like if it starts over here, it won't end up all the way up here, the waveform, and then it'll like F up our volumes and everything. It's basically a way we want to control the volume. So I'm going to lower the threshold like this. See how it's cutting out that peak that I mentioned before? And it's also cutting out a little bit of this hump, but it's okay because it's making things more even. We want our audio to be even. Actually, except for drums. Drums, we want to maintain a little bit of transients in them. And by transients, I basically just mean, if I zoom in here and show you the waveform, this up here is like a transient. And then as it decays down, the transient is basically just like a click. If that makes, like, if I can go like this. Oh, that's a little bit fucked, actually. That's more or less the transient. And then this is kind of just like extra stuff. So if you see, if I play it like this, it doesn't sound as punchy. It doesn't sound as present. But if I play it from back here, it sounds full. And it sounds like beefy. So before and after. Anyways, that's why with drums, we kind of want to keep the transients because we want our drums to be punchy and stuff. I have only a few minutes left. I really want to say that covers it all. I mean, if I forgot anything, let me know. I'm going to wait a little bit to see if the chat's rolling. If there's any questions. Or if there's anything I should do in the next 3 minutes. Okay, cool. Well, I think I'm gonna end it here. Oh, thank you for the kind words. I genuinely feel, I'm being honest, I feel like I could have explained a lot of the stuff better. I'm still working on it because it's just my first live stream. But again, if anybody has any questions, then make sure you put them in the Discord. Just at me, at Trillamade, and I'll try and answer them. Because I feel like I could be better answering at them when I have time to think about things rather than doing it on the spot. But yeah, I appreciate the kind words. Oh, we have a question. Is the process the same? Is the process the same when working with a live band? So with a live band, you wouldn't really focus too much on all the 5 things. The main thing that I work on, or that I focus on when I'm recording bands, is just EQ. So I'll try and, like, again, it's all about mic positioning and getting the recording as good as possible first. And then if I really feel like I want to do some EQ moves, I'll do some EQ moves. The effects are more for impressing the band after they've heard the recording, if I'm being super honest. Because the fact of the matter is, a lot of the stuff that sounds raw recording is not what we're used to hearing, and because it's not what we're used to hearing, it sounds like pretty bad. So again, I think with live bands, the only thing I would really do is put an EQ and then adjust certain frequencies. Like, for example, on the kick, if I want to make things more punchier, I would definitely cut out the low end on the kick, because then you're actually getting other... Anyways, that's for another time. I don't want to make things too complicated, but you're going to actually get a lot of low end buildup when you're recording things live because it's not computer generated. And then I'd probably boost around here just to get, again, that click that we were talking about for like transients of drums and stuff. And yeah, I think that's it. We're out of time. Thank you everybody for joining me tonight. Next week, you're going to be joined by Aiden. And he's going to talk a little bit more about music production in Ableton. Also, let me know in the Discord if you guys want to do basics of FL Studio, because I found that actually while I was going through FL Studio, some people may not know where things are. So if that's something you guys want, let us know in the Discord. Anyways, thank you so much, everybody, for coming out. Have a great night.